I am acting on the Commission's advice to put an indefinite order in place to restrict the sale or supply of puberty blockers through a prescription issued by either a private UK prescriber or a prescriber registered outside the UK for under 18s.
By following through on this announcement, Wes Streeting has knowingly sentenced trans children to death. He did so in spite of the very experts he consulted in the commission he cited overwhelmingly opposing such a ban that echoes an earlier one which is already known to have killed at least 16 trans children, a fact Wes Streeting and the Tory health ministers before him have attempted to cover up. That's where the UK is today when it comes to the basic humanity of trans children. That's what we need to unpack. But first, a quick content warning for the following: transmisia, medical violence, psychological torture, democide, and suicide. If our work has helped you, please consider supporting us via Patreon so that we can keep the channel running. You can also help us by liking, commenting, and sharing our work on social media. I'd also just like to take this time to remind our viewers that the statements made throughout our videos are the opinions of myself, the host, based on the evidence I have available to me. They are not and should not be taken as unquestionable fact, which is why we reference everything, because we're fallible. Thus, we strive to give you, the viewer, the ability to check all evidence for yourself in order to make up your own mind, which is what the reference numbers in the top left corner are for, being numbers that match up with the reference list found in the transcript linked down below. As such, we encourage all viewers to do their own research to reach an informed conclusion about the topic. Hi there, my name is Ethel Thurston, she, her, they, them, and we need to talk about Wes Streeting extending the Tories' ban on puberty blockers indefinitely, how he did so in spite of the overwhelming majority of experts warning against it, and how trans kids have responded. We will also be discussing the facts that the Labour government attempted to erase records of trans teenagers killed under the Tories, downplaying the harm behind the ongoing ban on puberty blockers. This is going to be a heavy video. Today's puberty blocker ban is, of course, the end result of the non-peer-reviewed pseudoscientific pamphlet known as the Cass Review. Not only did Hilary Cass, the inventor for whom the review was named, lie about her own methodology and the pre-existing endocrine research on puberty blockers, but she, with the assistance of the then Tory government, hid her bias going in, namely how she was known for promoting gender-critical books to her colleagues, books such as Abigail Shrier's Irreversible Damage. Gender-critical ideology routinely forwards the notion that a secretive yet global order of Jewish elites have managed to trick young white girls into believing that they're trans in order to decrease white fertility, thus bringing about the Great Replacement and the end of white Western civilization. Gender-critical ideology isn't merely bigoted, it is outright fascist in nature, and that is what Cass made it her mission to spread. To make things worse, the former Tory Minister for Women and Equalities turned leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch, has since come out boasting about the facts that the Cass Review wouldn't have been possible without first installing gender-critical fascists into key positions throughout the government, including healthcare, because said arguments are not self-supporting. They lack all credible evidence, meaning that, without first stacking the deck, such a report would never have made it to publishing. Badenoch also boasted about the fact that she ensured Hilary Cass received peerage for her pseudoscientific hit piece during an interview while she was running for Tory leader. These are just a few of the reasons that have led the Cass Review to be discredited by the global scientific community. Sadly, this meant nothing to the Tory party, who instilled a temporary ban on puberty blockers as they handed over power, a ban which was subsequently upheld by the Labour Party. That's when two separate NHS whistleblowers came forward about the fact that, following a similar now overturned ban in 2020, 16 children are known to have lost their lives to suicide in the years that followed, compared to just one suicide across the 7-year period prior to said ban. For while said ban was legally overturned in 2021, there was no effort to actually reverse the damage, meaning trans youth going through the NHS post-2020 were left in a state of limbo. This forced trans kids to seek private alternatives, which is what the latest ban targets. Both whistleblowers noted the fact that they had pleaded with the government to publicly address the issue, only to be threatened with disciplinary action should they go public about the scandal. To make matters even worse, Those whistleblowers also confirmed that they'd reached out to Hilary Cass as she was compiling her review, presenting said evidence to her, only for Cass to erase said suicides and thus said children from her discussion. This was almost certainly done since these 16 deaths, proportionally equivalent to more than 3,000 deaths among the cisgender UK population, would call into question her unevidenced fear-mongering about said life-saving medications. This would not be the last time such a report would be used by the government to cover up the deaths of trans children, as we'll see later. The trans community did not take things lying down, however. I and others have continued to report on these unnecessary deaths, whilst groups, including the child-led Trans Kids Deserve Better, have protested the bans for months. Trans Kids Deserve Better even managed to secure a meeting with Wes Streeting, letting him know that the cost of such policies was written in the blood of trans children, such as the Tavistock 16, ensuring that there could be no claims of ignorance. At that point, any extension of the Tories' ban was a deliberate choice made by Wes Streeting to sentence more trans children to psychological torture and even death. In spite of this, Wes Streeting chose to renew the temporary ban in November, leading 16 children from Trans Kids Deserve Better, representing the Tavistock 16, to stage a die-in at Victoria Station. This was a desperate plea to the public to take the matter seriously, to educate themselves and speak out, hopefully preventing any further deaths. Which brings us to the indefinite ban announced on the 11th of December, as seen at the start, an announcement made the very day we published our video on the aforementioned die-in. And we'll get to Trans Kids Deserve Better and how they responded, but first, I'd like to take a look at the consultation published alongside the announcement the commission Streeting mentioned in his speech, because it's a telling read. The consultation reached out to 120 organisations and received replies from 51 of them. Said respondents included academics and researchers, charities, clinicians, government bodies, patients and their families, pharmacists, and independent public bodies. It needs to be noted that the government did try to tilt the scales in its favour by including at least 8 known hate groups such as the LGBT Alliance and Sex Matters, as well as known fraud Hilary Cass. Yet, in spite of putting its fingers on the scales, the overwhelming majority of respondents, 59%, opposed said ban, with a meagre 27%, almost entirely accounted for via the 8 hate groups, supporting it. Just focusing down on researchers and academics, the people most up to date with the data, only a quarter supported making the ban permanent, whilst 3/4 strongly opposed doing so on the basis of the available evidence. Moving on to potential risks, more than 80% of respondents, 41 out of 51, stated that there were risks involved with making the ban permanent. Again, this is the government's own consultation. None of this nuance is seen in Wes Streeting's speech and his claims regarding the Commission's advice. The way he presented it made it sound like he had an overwhelming majority on his side, when that couldn't be further from the truth. Just like the lies told to uphold the non-peer-reviewed Cass review, Wes Streeting has once again chosen to present a fraudulent narrative to the British public in order to manufacture consent where there isn't any. Not only does the government's decisions go against everything the international scientific community has shown, but its very own consultations, much in the same way that even the Cass review didn't call for blockers to be banned, it was just cited as justification in doing so. Unsurprisingly, Trans Kids Deserve Better has something to say about the ban, publishing a press release on the 12th of December declaring that, quote, "Today, young activists from Trans Kids Deserve Better established an encampment outside the constituency office of Wes Streeting, the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care. The decision to take up camp outside his office was made after the Health Secretary announced the permanent ban on the prescription of puberty blockers in the House of Commons. The ban, based on the widely discredited Cass review, has stripped trans plus youth of one of the only sources of medical care that we have access to, including from private providers." End quote. with one of the kids adding that quote, "Wes Streeting has chosen politics over our lives. We are being put through an experiment, but the experiment is to deny us healthcare, not to provide it. He wants to see what happens to us when we grow up permanently altered in ways we never wanted, and we never consented to be part of that." End quote. Speaking of experiments, we previously went over the Nuremberg Code, the ethics guidelines famously created as a response to the atrocities committed by Nazi scientists inside of concentration camps during the Holocaust, to conclude that yes, the bans and proposed experiments surrounding puberty blockers do in fact violate numerous articles of said code. So this kid is not being hyperbolic. The violence currently being inflicted against trans youth in the UK is a clear human rights violation. It's also completely discriminatory in how said medications are still being prescribed to cis children suffering conditions such as precocious or early onset puberty, even though the methods used to demonstrate their safety on cis children are the very same methods used with regards to trans children. The CAS review famously called out a lack of double-blind randomized controlled trials, omitting the fact that an earlier attempt to carry out that very style of research on children with precocious puberty fell apart because it was impossible to maintain the double-blind aspect of the study. Children placed on a placebo saw changes in their body, realized they were on a placebo, and left the study, meaning that, by the end, all they had were the children placed on said blockers. Hilary Cass was quite literally demanding a standard of evidence which endocrine specialists have known to be impossible to achieve since 2001, over 2 decades ago, yet it's only trans children who are being made to suffer as a result. This reveals the true purpose behind said decision, that violence against trans youth is the point. Speaking of, the encampment has not been without issues. On top of the terribly cold winter weather, there have been unverified reports of gender-critical fascists assaulting said children, destroying their property. Though again, these are currently unconfirmed reports. Editor's note here, I did actually send Trans Kids Deserve Better an email as I began work on the script, and I received a response just as I was wrapping up the editing, letting me know that the person responding wasn't aware of any press release regarding that particular incident, but will see what they could do. It's possible that they might have already followed up by the time this video is out, in which case I'll include a copy of their response under the corrections and updates panel in the video description. That noted, this wouldn't be out of character with us having previously covered the time former comedy writer Graham Linehan, 56, sexually harassed and then physically assaulted a 17-year-old he believed to be a member of Trans Kids Deserve Better. I'll be sure to keep an ear out for any further news as the story unfurls. Which brings us to another bombshell that was dropped on the trans community the very same day as the permanent ban was announced, and that was confirmation that the government had withheld information from Professor Louise Appleby in order to cover up the deaths of trans children as a result of the 2020 ban. When the Tavistock 16 scandal first broke, the UK government sprung forward to downplay said deaths, which is where Appleby was brought in. Appleby rushed out a report that was presented by the press as evidence that the whistleblowers had exaggerated the problem. Now, Appleby's hatred for trans people was well known, so he wasn't exactly an impartial investigator, and people were rightfully critical of the government selecting an anti-trans bigot to investigate their anti-trans policies. This is what led people such as Dr. Caroline Littman to call into question the report, with Caroline having lost her daughter, Alice, to suicide whilst Alice was on the gender identity waitlist. As Caroline stated in her post, quote, "Forgive me for not trusting Professor Appleby's review of trans youth suicide. I emailed the gender identity clinic to tell them Alice had taken her own life. I never got a reply. No acknowledgement. No, sorry to hear this. Nothing. No reason to believe the Gender Identity Development Service is any better at record keeping or caring." End quote. She then shared the email she sent the clinic at the time, which read, quote, "To whom it may concern, with regard to my earlier email sent on the 22nd of May, I have received no more than an automated reply. I am writing now to tell you that my daughter killed herself on Thursday the 26th of May after 1,023 days on your wait list and 4 days after I sent my request. I now have a new question. What records do you keep of deaths by suicide of patients on your wait list? I feel very strongly that this information should be recorded, and if it is not, I need an explanation as to why not and to hear your plans to address this. Yours faithfully and broken-hearted, Dr. Caroline Littman." End quote. So Alice's death was very clearly linked to the lack of care enabled by the Bell v. Tavistock ruling, which made Caroline wonder if her daughter's death had been included in Appleby's report. To this effect, she made several Freedom of Information requests over the coming months, only receiving the most infuriating rejections imaginable, before finally receiving an answer on the 11th of December. The reply? Quote, "Your daughter was not included in the audit." End quote. In Caroline's own words, quote, "On the day the UK government announces a permanent puberty blocker ban, I learn Alice's data was not included in data sent to Appleby to assess for his rushed DHSC report that dismissed whistleblower claims of increased suicides in trans youth since Bell. The report is a proven sham. I am shaking. I am relieved. I am devastated. I am furious. I am bereft. The puberty blocker ban is a death sentence for some particularly vulnerable trans youth. It is unconscionable. When will the people with the power to help sit up and listen? It's a scandal, a cover-up, a crime. I'm so sad." End quote. This is the government that is currently deciding the futures of countless trans youth. A government that is not only aware that these policies are killing said children, but have taken steps to omit evidence from inquiries into said deaths. The scary thing is, if Caroline hadn't been on the ball, if she hadn't persisted in sending FOI after FOI, it's likely we would never have known about this scandal. And sadly, Alice likely isn't the only one. Who knows how many dead trans children the UK government has buried in its backyard? Yet this is the very same government that wants us to trust it when it tells us that its ban on puberty blockers is in the best interest of trans kids. I will probably do a standalone video about Alice at some point, since it's important to give said case the spotlight it deserves. But I just wanted to create a small video covering everything that has happened over the last week, as I've been struggling to keep up between dealing with my stalker situation. And, as if right on cue, just as I was wrapping up this script, the UK Crown Prosecution Service published guidelines which would seem to suggest that a trans person not informing a sexual partner of the fact that they are trans would legally constitute rape and sexual assault. This really is the worst timeline. Though, what do you think? What thoughts do you have about the new ban? What punishment should Wes Streeting face for his violence? What words of support would you offer any trans kid watching this? Did you notice something I missed? If so, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. And if you appreciate what we do here and want to help keep us running, please consider becoming one of our wonderful patrons who make our work possible. You can also make a one-time donation via PayPal or Super Thanks on YouTube. On that note, we'd just like to thank the following people: Matthew Kovac, Hannah Banghart, Goddess Alita, Socialite Wayne 6 Denials, Flynn, and Higgins the Seagull. And for myself, Adita and Levi, take care now.